Turning a pinball machine into a whole collection of Star Wars scenes is hard. I had to upgrade the play features and completely change the visuals to make it feel like a mini Star Wars theme park. That meant multiple iterations on every contraption just to make minifigures feel alive. I sent the Millennium Falcon into hyperspace, trapped an AT-AT on Hoth, and reenacted the Mustafar duel after tons of failed attempts. But everything had to start with a plain Lego pinball machine. I replaced the backlash with one featuring the Star Wars logo, a mini Star Destroyer, and an Imperial shuttle. Then I started removing the tiles and decorations. I wanted an iconic scene on the side, so I picked the binary sunset on Tatooine. It's a beautiful panoramic image that has brought nostalgia for Star Wars fans for decades. These transmission driving rings are perfect for representing the old machinery around Uncle Owen's farm. I also added a mini sandcrawler and of course Luke Skywalker in the foreground. Then I move on to the other side. I used the Forest of Endor as the background and built mini speeders for the Scout Trooper and Princess Leia. I used posing stands and clip arms to connect the speeders to the pinball machine. This way I could adjust their poses to make it look like they were in a high-speed chase. Next was retiring the astronaut and the space baby. At first I thought of using Mando and Grogu, which seemed like a perfect combination, until I remembered that I've collected some minifigures with light-up lightsabers that could be switched on and off with a magnet. It was such a great play feature that I definitely wanted to include them in my pinball theme park. I hated to do it, but I had to take Mando and Grogu's seats and give them to Luke and his father. Before I figured out how to switch on their lightsabers, I jumped into redesigning the launching system, because I really wanted the Millennium Falcon to launch together with the ball. This minimalist design was really neat, but getting both of them to shoot out at the same time was harder than I expected. I used the shock absorber as a spring-loaded shooter and placed the Falcon on a Lego plate to test it. After multiple trials, it was clear that it couldn't launch properly on a regular plate, so I made a slight tweak to the Falcon by adding this tiny car with 4 wheels underneath. I only had to remove a 1x2 plate from the build and attach a car in its place. Then this cute little Millennium Falcon car was ready to go. I switched the plate to a smooth tile to reduce friction and hoped it would work this time. Now we had enough power, but the orientation was still a mess. So I designed a new track with walls to keep it aligned. For the background, I used blue and white plates to create the feeling of jumping into hyperspace. This time, all the problems should be solved. It looked good. I attached the belt to the right side of the machine, right next to the ball launching track. But how could I shoot the ball and the Millennium Falcon together? The answer was to remove this gray piece and replace it with an axle reinforced piece. This black axle would push the Falcon from behind when I released the plunger. Next, I rebuilt the asteroid target with a Star Wars reference. And speaking of a target to hit, I couldn't think of a better one than the Death Star. I built a detailed Death Star with some wedge plates, but obviously it was just too large for this machine. Then, using a posing stand to preserve its super laser, I shrank the Death Star down, but it's still too big and blocked the pinball's path. I had to find a smarter solution, and luckily this Lego part saved the day. It's made of 2 hemispheres and typically it's used as an ion cannon, but this time it made a perfect mini Death Star. It worked just as well as the original asteroid. To hit the Death Star, I needed to redesign the up and over ramp bridge and turn it into the style of the Meridian Trench on the Death Star. However, some of the newer parts in the original build only came in one color, so I had to find a substitute to create this curve. This gave me the basic look of the trench run. Then I tested the ball. The side walls were too low and the ball would bounce out whenever it picked up a little more speed, so I had to reinforce the edges and make them higher. Since I didn't want the bridge to block the way, I attached gray plates to bracket plates, so the walls could be taller without getting too thick. After the adjustment, the ball stayed confined inside the trench. Now the color looked right, but I really needed more details. I attached various small pieces to a gray plate, making it look like the equipment packed walls inside the trench. However, it couldn't be mounted vertically because the bracket plates only had studs pointing away from the base. To solve this, I used a shortcut with hinge plates. I combined two of them and bent them to 90 degrees. Now, I had studs pointing toward the base. I attached the decorated wall to the hinge plates, and the trench wall looked just like the ones in the movie. I added hinges along the entire base and attached decorated walls of different shapes to them. Using more small pieces, I built a few turrets and installed them on the curved walls. To finish the design, I brought out an X-Wing and a TIE Fighter and attached them to the trench. After these upgrades, the ramp bridge looked totally different from the original build. These iterations added a lot of recognizable Star Wars details, and I was satisfied with the result. Now the ramp bridge had turned into the Meridian Trench. I then noticed the rod beside the flipper on the left. There was a hole underneath, and I wanted to fit a movable mechanism onto the spot. This is a gray sausage piece, and based on it, I had just learned how to build a fantastic mini AT-AT. The sausage was perfect for the neck, making it look like it was scanning around for enemies. Just like this harpoon launching airspeeder, I wanted it to spin around the AT-AT. And to make that happen, I had to borrow an idea from one of my previous builds. The gray propeller piece was the core, and I turned it into a revolver by adding a clicking mechanism that made it spin at intervals. This way, the revolver could shoot Lego bars at the targets. So I took that clicking mechanism and attached a green slope to it. I didn't want to control it directly by hand, so I needed a way to trigger it together with another motion. And that's why I chose this hole. I wanted it to activate whenever I pushed the flipper. To make this work, I copied the structure of the flipper and, as you can see, added an axle to the pushing mechanism. This red connector moved sideways whenever I pushed the button, and the green slope was positioned right in its path. Every time I pushed the button, the connector pushed the slope and triggered the mechanism. Then I attached the airspeeder above the hole. Now it would rotate whenever the left flipper was activated. But I didn't want it to just rotate, I wanted it to orbit around the AT-AT, so I attached a bar to the side of the axle. This way the airspeeder could revolve around the target in the center. I installed the airspeeder over the hole and replaced this wall with one featuring the AT-AT. I also needed to get rid of the yellow slope because I was creating a Hoth scene, which meant everything had to be covered in snow. In the corner, I also built a power generator for Echo Base. Once everything was in place, I could push the flipper button and watch the airspeeder orbit around the AT-AT. Besides modifying the original features, I also created new contraptions that weren't included in the original pinball machine. Using Lego bike handlebars, I made a round handrail which created a perfect platform for Darth Vader. Since the official set cost more than $300 with fewer than 300 pieces, I decided to make my own. This was the iconic duel scene in Cloud City where Darth Vader revealed the truth to Luke. I wanted to add a movable play feature so Luke could fall when a certain score was triggered during the pinball game. At first, I used hinges to connect the extension so when it was pushed down, Luke would fall. This method though was a bit awkward, so I removed the hinge connection and added an axle instead. I used it as a pivot, and to lock everything in place, I used this yellow lift arm and red axle to hold the angle. Without any disturbance, the extension stayed flat, but once I pulled out the red axle, it instantly fell down. I thought the contraption could be less obvious, so I tried using a gear instead, but with a spinning gear, it was hard to keep the extension perfectly horizontal. The angle could be different at every time. So I gave up on that plan and went for another solution on the other side. If everything was attached firmly enough, really firm, I could use a red beam underneath to hold the extension in place. By extending and retracting the beam, I could control the whole section freely, so I developed this idea further and built it into my new contraption, which had a black beam controlled by this gear. Clip it in and turn the gear, and the whole section rose to a horizontal position. It automatically locked in place, so I didn't have to hold the gear all the time. What's even better was this orange round brick, which turned together with the gear. So it looked like Darth Vader was cutting through the structure and making Luke fall. This way I turned the prototype into a working build. After adding side supports to the machine to make sure it could hold the weight, I installed the whole contraption on the right side. Now Luke's fate depended on the score. Then I realized I still hadn't used the Obi-Wan and Anakin minifigures, so I brought out my prototype of the Mustafar duel scene and tried to recreate the fight on the pinball machine. I made this half-circle mechanism with gears to make a minifigure jump forward and spin at the same time. Then I hid the mechanism behind the background and attached the flowing lava river to the base. I also kept a spinning round plate on high ground so it would turn together with the gear. After adding more details, I could finally add my minifigures with light-up lightsabers to the build. Anakin deserved some special treatment, so I attached him directly to the axle, making him the one who would jump forward. You underestimate my power. Don't try it, Anakin. This build was too big to fit on the machine, so I made a smaller version. It was only half the width and a third of the length, but it preserved all the play features. Obi-Wan turned, Anakin was cut in half, and even his lightsaber turned off. Why did his lightsaber stop glowing? The answer was hidden beneath the rock, where a magnet awaited for Anakin to fall, automatically turning off his lightsaber. I reinforced the left side of the machine so I could add the duel scene without interfering with the other installed features. The builds had already taken up almost every bit of space on the pinball machine. This was Anakin casting Vader's shadow, and it filled the last remaining corner. Now it was time to come back to Luke and Vader's duel. I needed to make their weapons light up at the same time when Luke got close to Vader. The easiest way was to lift the plate with two magnets, and a chain came into my mind. But pulling it manually wasn't ideal, so I built a pulley to control the chain. That turned out to be too clumsy, so I moved on to the second idea, using a seesaw. This way, I only needed to press one end and the other end would lift the magnets. But it still wasn't compact enough. Finally, I found a third solution, spinning an eccentric connector. At first, it stayed at the bottom, then I turned the gear and the connector rose, lifting the magnets with it. Kept turning and the magnets dropped back down. After creating 8 new play features for the machine, I thought it was perfect for a Star Wars theme, until I discovered a serious problem. All the contraptions were controlled by hand, so how could they know the score while I was playing? I needed a robot to track the score and trigger them automatically. Luckily, I had a Lego Spike Hub. Before the Star Wars conversion, I had already added a scoring and display system to the original pinball machine with the help of a Spike Hub. I looked into the mechanisms hidden underneath and modified them with color sensors. Each hit on the asteroid target would be detected by the sensor, and the hub calculated the score by adding 5, 10, and 20 points for a 3-hit combo. The same idea was applied to one of the spinning bumpers, and the sensor would add 1 point whenever the bumper was triggered. It was hard to get onto the bridge, so passing through it was worth 30 points. I also added a sensor to detect the start and the end of the game, creating an automatic loop. The astronaut minifigure used to move toward the baby when the asteroid was hit, so I applied the same sensor setup to trigger Luke and Vader's fight. When Luke came close, the sensor told the hub to move the magnets, which turned on their lightsabers right away. I installed the rest of the sensors and motors in place, like this one to detect balls traveling through the tunnel, and this one to detect balls passing through the trench. Lastly, I connected all of them to the hub and programmed them. Now, with all the contraptions set, we are ready to test the machine. The Millennium Falcon shoots out with the ball and returns to its starting position automatically. And let's see what happens if I get a low score. Without any skill, I scored 0. That way, Darth Vader immediately welds his lightsaber, cutting off the support. The motorized beam pulls back, making Luke fall down. This is what happens with a low score under 50 points. If I played this game before and somehow managed to score a few points, but then let the ball roll into the tunnel on the left, Anakin gets cut in half. And the tragedy continues because 16 points is still under 50. The color sensor constantly monitors the tunnel, and once it detects the ball, the contraption activates. After some practice, I'm getting the hang of this game. I shoot the ball into the trench, which gives me 30 points, and hit the Death Star twice, giving me another 5 and 10 points. That puts me over 50, and Luke is saved. Finally, I get over 100 points, and after several hit combos and another trench run, I reached 140. That not only avoids the bad ending, but also reveals the hidden good ending. Anakin and Padme get married in public.